So good afternoon, and thank you all for being here for this town hall and an update on football at Schreiner University. We got a few more trickling in. I'm Toby Appleton, Schreiner University's Marketing and Communications Manager. I'm joined on stage by Schreiner University President, Dr. Charlie McCormick, Schreiner's Dean of Students, Dr. Charlie Huber, and Schreiner's Athletic Director, Bill Riley. As we get started, I want you to enjoy this message from one of our alums and Athletic Hall of Honor inductee.
Hello, I'm Charlie Johnson. I went to Schreiner Institute in 1956 on football scholarship. I was so good they dropped the sport. And I went on and played 15 years in the National Football League for the Oilers, the Denver Broncos, and 9 years for the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm happy to report that Schreiner is bringing back football. Go Mountaineers!
So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Schreiner University's President, Dr. Charlie McCormick.
So thank you all for coming today to this announcement regarding football at Schreiner University. I'm delighted to let you know that on October 21st at its regular fall meeting, the Schreiner University Board of Trustees unanimously voted to authorize the return of football to Schreiner. Now, as many of you know, football has had a long history here, stretching back to the school's beginnings in 1923. And if the early history of the school, as it's documented in proud promise, is to be believed, Schreiner's first president, Big Jim Delaney, resigned as president because the board refused to let him get rid of football. That's true, I think. His successor, Dr. Andy Eddington, was successful in this same request several years later, and you just heard Charlie Johnson talk about that. But he was successful when the enrollment at Schreiner bottomed out at about 300 students. And when you're at 300 students, there are all sorts of things you're no longer going to be able to do. And my guess is that my fellow Schreiner presidents who followed Dr. Eddington, like me, have been asked about when we're going to bring back football more than any other single question. Dr. Junkin, Dr. Summerlin, and I, we all developed the habit of sort of laughing at the question. But that never quelled people's curiosity, hope, anticipation. We did get serious about considering football back in early 2017 when we engaged in a process to determine what new athletic teams and varsity teams we should bring to campus. In fact, we surveyed students and faculty about what sports they would like to see us start, and students voted football in the number 1 spot and swimming in the number 2 spot, while faculty and staff voted swimming in the number 1 spot and football in the number 2 spot. But we had other team options we could consider that had lower barriers to entry, and truthfully, even if those barriers to entry did not exist, we didn't have anywhere to play football. Our athletic conference, the Southern Collegiate Athletic Conference, or SCAC, didn't sponsor football, and those SCAC schools that had football had to pay sizable fees to join other football sponsoring conferences as affiliate members so that they had a place to play. And that seemed to me an entirely unreasonable situation in which to find oneself. But then, one of our SCAC schools, Centenary College of Louisiana, made the announcement that they were restarting football after a hiatus of several years. And in doing so, they put the SCAT conference in a position to now sponsor the sport. And all at once, we at Schreiner had a reason to seriously consider bringing back football. So in the summer of 2021, we commissioned an external analysis of what would need to happen for football to return as a Schreiner sport. We provided that information to the Schreiner Board of Trustees at their fall meeting last year and asked them to tell us if we should conduct our due diligence regarding the benefits and cost of bringing back football, or if we shouldn't waste anybody's time in doing that exercise. And though the vote by the board this month was unanimous to bring back football, a year ago it was not unanimous. At that time, a majority of the board asked us to engage in the deliberative process, but some board members were clear that they weren't enthusiastic about this consideration. To a person, they now agree that under certain conditions, bringing back football is in the best interest of the university's long-term future. And candidly, it took me a while to warm up to the idea of football. Sure, I understood the argument that it aligned with the city of Kerrville's 2050 strategic plan to develop itself as a college town and a sports destination. And I understood how football aligned with our strategic plan to lean into our identity as a uniquely Texan institution and our commitment to reaching out to rural students where on Friday nights the community shuts down for football. But it wasn't really until I was pulled aside at a meeting this summer by a college president who had been a college football coach for most of his career that I moved from being lukewarm about football to being an advocate. He reminded me that one of the crises in American higher education is the reality that young men are attending and completing college at rates well below where they should be. And he continued, football can be one way and one of the most powerful ways for some young men to find their way to college and to complete college. Football, he argued, must be seen as mission-centric, especially at the Division III level. And based on the evidence I've looked at, I'm convinced he's right. But look, football isn't an easy decision for anyone. I know better than most, because of my position on campus, there are lots of mouths that want to be fed all across campus. Some people argue we need this type of new building. Others argue we need this sort of new equipment. Still others argue we need to grow our endowment. And I often hear about all the new positions for which we need to hire. So why spend money starting football if we have all of these existing needs and desires? And I think to answer that question, you have to first start with the reality that we can never meet all of these needs and desires. Because as some of them are met, more emerge. No one's being malicious or greedy. That's just what happens in a complex and ever-changing environment like a college campus. And people, understandably, often believe the project they care most about is the most important project to pursue. And they should believe in just that way. If you don't believe in the importance of your project, then your project isn't worth doing, probably. But it means we'll never have full alignment on which project to pursue first. So here's how I approach this complication. I want to support the project that's most likely to be a catalytic event. By that I mean, what project, if pursued, is most likely to result in helping other projects be achieved? I can't identify another project that has as much catalytic potential as football. Certainly, football will have an impact on our enrollment and therefore on our operating budget because it's going to generate new revenue that otherwise would have gone elsewhere. And it's hard to over-exaggerate the importance of new revenue, especially on the scale of football, because that provides resources to do all sorts of interesting things. And a great big program like football brings assets to campus that benefit students beyond those just on the football team. New positions, for example, like equipment managers and strength and conditioning coaches and additional athletic trainers. And a great big program like football leads to new spaces on campus, like a new weight room. And as a catalytic program, football is likely to generate opportunities to start additional athletic programs and new academic programs and new co-curricular programs that otherwise wouldn't have the capacity to launch. And very importantly, football will unlock funding sources, both individual and institutional, that would otherwise be closed to us. Some of those funds will be in support of this football program, but some of them will not be program specific. So a few of us are absolutely giddy about bringing back football. Most of us are cautiously enthusiastic. We've got a lot of work to do before we're ready for our first competitive season in fall 2025, and our athletic director, Mr. Bill Raleigh, will review that process in just a moment. But let me just say before I give up the podium that I know there must have been other moments in Schreiner's history where the stakes seem high and the best decision perhaps just unclear. When the decision was made to reinstitute intentional military training and programs on campus in the early 2000s and after a long hiatus, I bet there were people saying to themselves, we got rid of all that military stuff years ago. Why in the world do they want to bring it back now? Another high-stakes decision that I bet caused all sorts of consternation was whether to admit women as residential students. I know that someone, somewhere, was worried that this decision would destroy the soul of Schreiner. And we know that there was tremendous opposition to Schreiner adding the junior and senior years to its collegiate offerings in the early 1980s, and in doing so transforming itself from a junior college to a college awarding baccalaureate degrees. For some, that was just unthinkable. And troublesome though all these moments were, all of those decisions were the right decisions at that moment in Schreiner's history. After all, they brought us to this moment today. And as I've thought about all these inflection points in Schreiner's past, I've increasingly come to the conclusion that asking if this decision or that decision is the right decision is probably asking the wrong question. The better question that I suspect was also always asked at these moments was, how do we make this the right decision? I look forward to working with you over the next several years as we answer that question definitively. And I'd now like to introduce our Dean of Students, Dr. Charlie Huber, to the podium to provide some additional context for the decision to bring back football. Dr. Huber?
Well, thank you, Dr. McCormick. So over the past few years, I've been charged with the task of weighing all the evidence, positives and negatives, in terms of adding new programs on campus that are co-curricular in nature. I get absolutely excited thinking about the ways in which we as a university can grow and that impact and how it can help our community. I am unashamedly one of the individuals that Dr. McCormick referred to as giddy about football. I played football in high school, and despite what you may think, I did not play in college. Though I was a college athlete, I've coached at that level, and I have a deep love for the sport of football and what it's done for me. But I also have a love for athletics and what it does for all of our athletes on campus. Part of what helps get me excited about football is Schreiner and its history with the sport. The stories that can be told of young men who on these very grounds came together and learned above all else how to get up after being knocked down. The timeline for football on campus is not overly complicated. Not long after we opened our doors, we started a football program. I like to point out that in 1926, we were undefeated. We beat teams like Sul Ross, McMurray, even Texas Tech. Schreiner maintained a program on campus for over 30 years until 1957 when the board voted to discontinue football. And as Dr. McCormick pointed out, I bet that was a difficult decision, and there were people on both sides. Fast forward to 2017 when we found ourselves looking to expand opportunities that would attract students to our campus, specifically through the participation in co-curricular programs. We called this our Admissions Growth Initiative. We looked at everything from chess to football to Western swing dancing. And as Dr. McCormick pointed out, we polled our campus, and swimming and football were the top two. Football far and away. Last year, we engaged the Pictor group to do a feasibility study. We got the endorsement from the board to take a deeper dive into football. In many ways, numbers of people have done a lot of work, and the culmination of those efforts is today with this announcement. Make no mistake, I was, am, and continue to be enthusiastically 100% for football. I see it as an additional way we can fully recognize our mission and continue to fill our promises. Football teaches the importance of showing up, giving your all, embracing interdependency. It teaches young men that working together with other young men towards a common goal is paradoxically the best way to become a fully formed individual. Schreiner has long been committed to educating students holistically. And from the beginning, we have been an institution of opportunity where students from a variety of backgrounds and experiences learn through our educational programs that equip them to achieve, excel, and lead. For years, college football has offered a diverse range of young men an opportunity to leverage their desire to compete and participate in a team sport while connecting to their educational goals. We are aware that football is a major undertaking, and one of the fears that has been expressed on several occasions is that football would change the culture on campus. I was in a meeting about football when we had the Pictor group on campus, and when the students were asked the question if they thought football would change the culture on campus, one student immediately jumped in and said, "You dang right it will." And I'd have to agree with him. I believe it will change the culture on our campus, but I believe that change will be for the better. I'd like to think in my time here, people like Dr. Goodwin, David Garrels, Toby Appleton, Dr. Costley, Bill Raleigh, and many others have helped us to start a shift on this campus. A shift from going home on weekends to staying on campus, to experiencing the campus life. We no longer wear UT and A&M shirts on campus, or TLU shirts. Ugh. It's been a positive shift towards a vibrant and engaged population, proud enough of Schreiner to participate in Maroon Madness, Maroon Monday, and even wear a kilt on Fridays. Some of you still need to do that, by the way. I think football will only help to enhance and continue this momentum. I know that our students are coming from high schools where nearly all of their fall activities and traditions are centered on football and Friday night games. And when they arrive on campus, their peers at other schools are going to Saturday football games and participating in tailgates and fall homecoming, things we don't have because we don't have football. One student in a survey stated that with football, we would finally be a real college. Having an additional 100 young men on campus will undoubtedly change us. I can understand more than most the fear that this might be a negative change. After all, I'm the dean of students, ultimately responsible for discipline. The term toxic masculinity has been used when talking about football and the troubles that have plagued other programs. But it was Roger Hughes, who Dr. McCormick mentioned, president at Doane College, former football coach. He helped me and many of us see that with the right coaching staff in place, colleges have proven that we can leverage the positive aspects of football, like competition, discipline, hard work, how to lead and follow, accountability, teamwork, sacrifice, all to help cultivate young men who have grit and embody what we are looking to develop in all of our students and have been doing so since 1923, almost 100 years ago. I will point out this is not just the crazy dream of an overly enthusiastic dean of students, but it's the culmination of a concerted effort by many of us to look forward and explore all of the options we have available. As I mentioned earlier, 5 years ago, we launched multiple new programs as an aggressive admissions growth initiative. Some sports like shotgun, rifle, and equestrian were easy. We established them because we had local resources in place and had the capacity, while we had to develop our own capacity in other programs like esports, wrestling, and debate. But it is true that every year we evaluate all of our athletic and varsity programs and academic co-curricular programs, and we look to continue to expand these opportunities for students, to continue to participate in organized co-curricular activities that tie them to an educational goal. To that end, we've implemented a club sports program to help students get involved in the creation of these. Things like our barbecue team, powerlifting, we're exploring sailing. I've even been approached by spike ball. There's a number of options. But we really need one major program to sort of shift, and football checks all of the boxes. It's the large program we've been looking for. It has a massive recruiting pool that can help us in our rural recruiting initiative. It aligns with our mission and has a positive ROI, return on investment. As Dr. Frampton has stated, can we really be uniquely Texan without a football team? So I circle back to that survey where football and swimming were listed as the top 2 choices of our community. The major barrier for these 2 programs really deals with the startup cost. It only makes sense that if we have a path to address that barrier, we press down hard on the gas and we get moving. Before I turn this over to our athletic director, Bill Raleigh, to talk through the process, I want to say that I believe the best private universities in Texas have football teams. I intentionally left Texas Lutheran off this list. I'm so very excited that Schreiner will be joining this group. So Dr. McCormick is right. I am absolutely giddy about football and what I believe football can and will do for our campus. The image of this helmet gives me chills every time I see it. So yes, I'm giddy. And I guess now I'm going to say to everyone else it's time to giddy up.
Well, anybody who knows me would never use giddy in the same sentence. So, I'm unabashedly excited about football, and I think it's a great thing for this university, but if someone ever uses giddy in a sentence with me, it's going to be an interesting day. Schreiner is an NCAA Division III institution, and that will not change with football. Coaches will actively recruit student athletes. The admissions office then admits those students to the campus. Financial services packages them and make sure financial aid works. And then the coaches give them the opportunity to continue to play their sport and get an education. Anyone that has heard me talk, and I'm nowhere near as proficient as other people in these things. There we go. Anybody who's ever heard me talk, this is something that is part of the philosophy of athletics at Schreiner. The phrase, "it is a privilege, not a right, to be a student athlete," is something I believe very strongly in, and this is the foundation of the athletic department. It means that all student athletes must take care of their business as students first, academically, and on campus, before they can represent this university in athletics. This is something that we do every day in athletics, and it's something that will continue with the induction of football. Finally, there's not a freestanding athletic program in college athletics. We're all tied to the university. Athletics is here to support and enhance the mission of the university, and we take this role very seriously in athletics, and we will continue that with football. As has been mentioned, we've been talking about football since 2017. As Dr. McCormick will recall, on my interview for the athletic director position in 2017, he asked the question, he asked what programs I thought were important to consider in athletics at Schreiner. And my immediate response was football. I was part of the process of adding football at Southwestern University when I was the basketball coach and assistant athletic director there. So I have firsthand knowledge of the big undertaking, of how big an undertaking this is. Hence, you understand my lack of giddiness as we look forward to doing what we're faced with. But I also saw what a positive impact it had on the campus. I'm not a native Texan, and on my first day as a head coach at University of Dallas, my first head coaching job in basketball, the athletic director walked into my office and put the book Friday Night Lights onto my desk with the simple admonition, "Read this." He said, "It'll help you understand the culture of football, culture of athletics in Texas." It was a tremendous help for me, helped me adjust coming to this big state and understanding what Texas was. But it really didn't hit home with me until 14 years later when my oldest daughter started high school. And I'm sitting at my desk in August, and I get a phone call. And my wife says, "Guess what? We're football season ticket holders at Eastview High School in Georgetown." I had never gone to a high school game in the state of Texas, never wanted to go to a high school game in the state of Texas. But my daughter was going to be singing the national anthem in the choir at every home game. She was going to be there. All our friends in the community were going to be there. It became part of what we did for the next 4 years of our lives, was home football games. This reinforced in my mind how deep the football culture is in Texas.
and was really one of the, made me think that this is something that we can really enhance the community in the situation here at Schreiner University. Our goal is to have our first varsity football game in the fall of 2025 at Antler Stadium here in Kerrville, with a goal of about 120 students on the sidelines. We have some hurdles that need to be jumped this spring before we can put that in writing and put that in concrete. Things like the sale of the Loop property and some other economic decisions that need to be made. We are cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to get that date done, but understand that there's going to be some hurdles that need to be taken care of. As we thought through this process, we had some things we really wanted to take care of. And one, as we want to make sure we want to make sure that we did not distract from the endowment campaign, which is vital to the long-term history of this university. We want to make sure we only enhance the culture of the university. Furthermore, we want to make sure athletics is positively impacted by the addition of football. It will take some time and it will not be easy, but I believe that all of us will rise with the addition of football. Finally, we do not want to isolate athletics from the rest of the campus. It is important to me that the student part of the student athlete moniker, I can't even speak anymore, sorry, excuse me. Student athlete moniker is student first. That is something we believe very strongly in, I believe very strongly in. We want to make sure that we create an environment in which the student can achieve, whether it's in academics, whether it's in their growth, and whether it's in athletics. And I think football will help us do that. I'm excited about the prospects of what we can do with the football program. I see things like an opening football game tailgate where our student activities and all students are exposed to all the great things that happen on campus at a football tailgate. Or an academic department like, say, exercise science, having a tailgate where they can meet and greet with alumni and present students and enhance that experience. A Schreiner Saturday, picture a Schreiner Saturday in the fall in which we bring in all prospective students, and part of that is a chance to go see a football game. And then finally, one of the biggest ones, and I tell this story, one of the greatest things I've ever heard in my life, at Southwestern, we did a homecoming. First year we had football, we had a homecoming weekend with a football game. In the history of the institution, the largest attendance at a homecoming ever. They got really smart and wanted to prove that it wasn't about football, and they took it off a football weekend the next year, and they had the lowest attendance of alumni in the history of the institution. I picture a fall where we can bring back alumni and have that experience of what it is great. As you see on the screen, this is a tentative timeline, and Dr. McCormick has mentioned that we will be adding support positions along with the football staff. And finally, we're anticipating a student body growth with the addition of football and other student opportunities like possibly women's swimming, or a more robust pep band or marching band, or cheerleaders or color guard, as well as an anticipated bump in overall student enrollment with the increase of our profile. This will benefit all portions of the university and our campus, as we will need to grow our faculty and staff and positions to manage that increase in our student population. As part of the process, many of you are aware that we've been involving in an athletic master planning process that has been going on for a couple of years now. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Master planning does not mean it's going to happen. So this is beautiful. I would love to be the athletic director and come to work with these facilities. This is a vision and a framework that will guide us and possibly future decision makers as we make decisions, as we grow our facilities and our teams. As mentioned earlier, we are focused on the addition of football, helping raising the profile and experience of all students on campus. This process will not be easy, and not everyone will be happy, which is understandable as we make tough choices with limited resources. But our long-term goals are visualized in the images on the screen that we believe will benefit athletics and the entire campus. But to reiterate, this is a vision of what we would like to see and not a plan set in stone. So no one quote me that we're going to have a track in the next couple of years. This is something we're working forward. Anybody who knows me knows I'm very passionate about collegiate athletics. And as a coach, I always thought of myself as an educator first and a sport coach second. And that's something that our coaches understand and embrace. The task of adding a football program to our campus is going to take a university-wide effort and a community that is willing to trust, work, and achieve together. It is not always going to be smooth and everyone going to be happy with each decision. I lived through this at Southwestern. But if we are willing to do what is best for our students and the university, this will be a transformational experience and launch Schreiner into its next 100 years. My commitment to the university is that this spring I will visit with the major constituent groups on campus and off campus, like faculty, staff, students, alumni, donors, Kerrville residents, anybody who wants to talk to me, to listen to concerns, answer questions, hear ideas, and brainstorm solutions. We will be as transparent as we possibly can. Anybody who knows me knows that you're going to get an answer. May not be the right one, may not be the smartest one, but it's going to be an answer. But I think that's so important. But this endeavor is not mine or athletics or Dr. McCormick's. It is Schreiner University's. I am confident that all of us can make this a positive experience for our students, faculty, staff, and the Kerrville community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giddy. Mr. Raleigh. Mr. Raleigh. Coaches, if any of y'all want to borrow that nickname, y'all feel free to go ahead and do that. So we're going to take some questions, hear any comments that you may have now. Although keep in mind, there's still lots to figure out, so the most honest answer that we may have for you at this point may be, we don't yet know. But first, I want to just thank a couple of people in the room who work behind the scenes, but they work very deliberately and most capably as we work towards this decision. First of all, I want to recognize and acknowledge our board chair, Ms. Janet McKinney. Janet, if you'll raise your hand. We got a couple other board members in the audience today who also participated in this process. Mr. Carl Ranslaven. Carl, if you'll raise your hand. Mr. Dave Weekly. Dave. And I've lost Aaron Yates, but he's here somewhere too. There you go, Aaron. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful to work with this group of critical and caring and just smart people as we worked our way to this decision. I also want to thank our faculty athletic representative, Dr. Brian Bernard. Brian, if you'll raise your hand. He's walked alongside us through this whole process, and to Dr. Matt Robinson. I saw Matt here somewhere. Matt, if you'll raise your hand. You know, Dr. Robinson has more first-hand knowledge of Division III football than I think anybody else in this room, and that was really invaluable to hear about your experiences, Matt. Thank you very much. And then there was a whole bunch of people who met on a regular basis to talk about this and debate it and argue and ultimately come to agreement on this. If you were part of that group, will you raise your hand so we can acknowledge you too? So thanks to you all, and now we'll open this up for any questions or comments you may have. And I should say there are lots of people in the room who could answer these things, so I may switch out the podium here with somebody, but I'll facilitate the conversation at this point. Yes, Wendy.
Okay, so from a Title IX perspective, I'm sure y'all looked at that, and you mentioned women's think swimming.
Mhm.
Are there other sports, women's sports, that are being considered as well? Or how does that balance out with football?
Yeah, so we looked with actually Pictor Group's help about would we be out of compliance with the Title IX, and we actually don't think we would be out of compliance with Title IX even with the football team. Having said that, we think it makes good sense to very much look at a women's athletic team to add to, which is why we're looking at women's swimming. And I can't give you an update on when that would be or what that timeline would be, except just to say we are very seriously looking at that. Mhm. Yes, sir.
My voice is a little hoarse right now, but I just want to first say thank you to y'all for opening up questions and comments and putting on a public meeting for this. My question, I may have missed it, but what happened in 1957 that led to the discontinuation of the football team, and what contingencies do we have in place for something like that?
Yeah, so really when football was discontinued, and I should say for those of you who don't know Andy Eddington's story, Andy was actually a football coach in Alabama. A kind of a famous football coach. He developed something called the flea circus, where I think everybody on the offense touched the ball at one point before. So he was very passionate about football. But the enrollment had dropped. This was after a lot of those first students came back as a result of the GI Bill that had sort of run its course, and Andy was faced with very low enrollment rates, and he had to do everything he could in order to try to rebuild that enrollment. And that means that anything that was superfluous, he was cutting to survive. So at 300 students, he decided football had to go, and the board supported him in that at that time. Thank you for that question. Yes, sir.
I guess plans are to participate in the SCAC conference. How many schools in the SCAC conference don't have football?
So, Bill, I'm going to check with you. I think the SCAC has just released its press release this afternoon. Is that right? So right now we have 4 schools that play as affiliate members in the SCAC conference. That's Trinity University, Southwestern University, Texas Lutheran University, and Austin College. And according to our bylaws, if we sponsor football, then all of those schools will come back and play football within the SCAC. So there's 4. Centenary College has announced that it is bringing back football. That's number 5. In a press release that's now out, you'll read that the SCAC has also brought in McMurray University as one of our schools. That's number 6. That now gives us an AQ, automatic qualification in the conference for football. And we've also announced today that Lyon College in Arkansas will be an affiliate member playing football with us as well. So if Schreiner comes in, and we will, that gives us 8 schools in the conference who play football. University of Dallas will not be playing football. Colorado College will not be playing football. University of St. Thomas, they've been ramping up with their sports ever since they came into the conference. So they're not planning on it now, but who knows in a week. So, yes.
Were the other universities supportive of your efforts, including Trinity and some of the ones here close by?
They were, and those schools that have to play in affiliate conferences, that's an expensive proposition. So they would prefer not to have to pay that additional fee. And then it's also the case that those schools in our conference, we're a conference for a reason, which is because in many ways we're like schools. And there is another conference in Texas that has a perennial Division III contender for a national championship. And they just recruit a different sort of student to play. And there are a lot of schools who don't want to have to play that school every year. So they would prefer to join a group of schools that are like in nature. And I'm going to tell you, I just saw another Board of Trustee member back here, Jane Ragsdale. Jane, if you'll raise your hand. Thank you so much, Jane. You snuck in on me. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Do you have a wish list for a head coach yet?
Not really, except this. Look, you know, if we have a football team, we should win some games. Let's start with that. But as important, if not more important than that, we want a person who's going to grow young men and to find students, as our athletic director mentioned, who graduate from this institution and go on to live wildly successful lives after college. That's a lot to ask of any one person, but that person's out there. We intend to find him. Yes, sir.
Dr. McCormick, I was in Houston this past weekend at the wedding of Blake Bauer, 2015 graduate. And a number of his groomsmen were graduates of Schreiner. At the reception, they surrounded me. They wanted to know everything about what was going on at school. And it very quickly came to football. And they wanted to know all I knew about it. And it didn't take me long to tell them that I think it was in the works. And one of the graduates who lives in Cincinnati now turned to the other ones and said, you know, that would be a homecoming that we would come back to.
That's great.
It kind of reinforces what Bill was talking about. Is that
Thank you.
It was they were kind of excited with the thought.
Thank you, Jay. I know that this announcement today is a little bit anticlimactic. I was sharing with some people. I was at a meeting off campus just before I came here, and I was telling them I got to get back to campus. I'm about to make an announcement. They're like, "It's about football. You're starting football." I was like, "Well, yeah, but I guess you don't have to come to the meeting now." So, what else?
That comment from Jay got Amy giddy.
That's right. That's right. Yes, sir, Carl.
Explain the layout of the fields that are going to be enhanced with stadiums, for softball as well as in the soccer.
Sure.
Not in this particular sense, but
Sure. So one of the things that we were looking at when we started this discussion, and really the board asked us to do, is it may take 20 years to bring football onto campus. As Bill mentioned, this is a vision that could take 20 years to fully realize. But is there a way to fit all of the parts together on campus so that can be a goal towards which we're striving? And that was a lot of the work that the master planners did here. So you can see in this illustration what they've done is they turned and flipped softball and baseball, and that actually tucks it down a little closer to the field. Our field house is just above where our stands are for softball and baseball. And what that accomplishes by putting that field house there is a sort of concentration of facilities. So everything from bathrooms to concessions to weight rooms to locker rooms and all of those sorts of things. And that means we get maximal use out of that building. And then heading north from that, it includes both a track and a turf field that could be used for multiple sports. And then on the far side would be where the stands are. So just behind those stands is the Summerlin Music Building to keep you oriented there. So everything will fit, and we have checked and double checked to make sure those dimensions are correct. But they'll all fit in there. I got here in 2009, and when I got here, the spring before I arrived, the Mountaineer Fitness Center had just been opened. And on the plans were a new event center, which now you can see has been completed. And that's where volleyball and our basketball teams play. And part of the plan was to include a field house. So this helps us realize what has been a plan really a long time in the works. And I think that's a good reinforcement of Bill's notion that this is a vision, and keep in mind this vision will shape as things change, as people change, as priorities change. But this is what we're looking at and towards right now. Yes, sir. Cody.
So with the bringing in of football, this would obviously increase your enrollment. What would the situation with parking be like?
Well, that's a good question, and I'll tell you, that these are issues. Parking and, quite honestly, space in a dining hall is another problem that we have to solve. If we have another couple hundred students total on campus, we're going to have a dining hall problem. So I don't have the answers to those, Cody, except to say that we know those are problems, and we've got to figure out those problems before fall of 2025 arrives. How many years do you have left, Cody? You a senior?
Like 4 months.
You can stay for graduate school and maybe help us deal with all those. So. What else? Well, look, thank you all very much for coming in today. I think Bill and Toby and I are happy to stay around up here if you have any additional questions. But thanks a lot. We look forward to working with you on this project. Have a great, great day. Thank you.